Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this. All right. It is Monday morning, day after Thanksgiving weekend, and I am here with Walker Thornton on this episode of Ignite Intimacy. What's happening, Walker?
Just getting over the weekend, getting back to work, thinking about the new year, and enjoying the fall weather.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're based in Virginia, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the weather like there right now? Do you still have leaves on the trees? Are you still experiencing some fall or?
Some leaves on the tree, not many left, but still some color. There was frost on my windshield this morning, so it was down to 35.
Wow.
With a high of 52 today. So different from your California weather.
Exactly. Yep. I'm here in sunny Los Angeles, and although it's been cool, it's not that cool. So, it's so great to be here with you today. This is a conversation, a topic that is a fresh topic in many ways for Ignite Intimacy, because we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the midlife sexual experience today, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Because that tends to be your area of expertise. That's what you've been focusing on. How long have you really been kind of diving into the midlife experience?
Probably for 4 years, which sort of mirrors my own path. I'm 62, so I've been through menopause, and that kind of helped inform my work as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how? What was your experience as you were entering menopause? And because I'm 39, so it's like I'm starting to sense into this nearing 40 and I still feel like a young woman. And I also know that as women near their 40s and 50s, that's when some significant changes start happening within a woman's body. And there are all these different stories like, oh, women's sex drive is the highest in their 30s, or there are all these different stories around that and sex drive and your libido and how that relates to where you are on your journey as a woman on the timeline, the age timeline. So I'm curious what your insights are, just things that you've experienced as a result of the work that you've been doing.
Oh, sure. So I was divorcing in my late 40s, early 50s. So by the time I started going through menopause, I was single and dating. I finished menopause, I think, officially in 2010. So I've been 6 years post.
Okay.
So I was also caregiving for my husband, then ex-husband. So I had some added stress in the mix. And in spite of that, I had a really simple menopause. It was pretty straightforward. I had some hot flashes. I had some night sweats and, sort of sleepless nights, but not bad. And maybe that's because I knew that was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what you expect. But it was an easy transition for me. I didn't fight it. It didn't really disrupt things for me. And, as I was sort of coming out of divorce and dating and deepening into my writing, I was also sort of experiencing all of it at the same time. And so my sex life got much better as the years progressed. I think partly because I was thinking about it, reading about it, learning and communicating with people and exploring. So, at 62, I'll be real blunt about it because I think I think enough of us don't talk about it. I have a great sex life. I'm not dry, so lubrication is not an issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time. I think we all have those moments when we're not quite as ready, or we're not quite as lubricated, or we're not quite in the mood as we want to be. But I'm not having any of those symptoms that sometimes women report, or that sometimes the media reports that we all have, that sort of doomsday thing about what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not been an issue for me. And I've during this time on and off, I've had a really receptive partner who would do anything I've wanted to explore and try.
Mm.
So, it's been a chance for me to really sort of stretch into things and discover myself in a way that I hadn't when I was much younger. So for me in my 50s and 60s, the sex was much better than it was when I was married.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Well, it's kind of like, okay, so a lot, I'm going to just venture to say, I know I make a lot of generalizations, but it's just my experience from what I've witnessed and some of the stats just on marriage and divorce and all of that. And I'm not sure if you married for purely out of love or, what the situation was when you were younger and making that decision early on. However, I would venture to say that many people who get married and then divorced and then meet someone new, it's like you learn so much about yourself and your own sexuality and that whole process. You learn so much through the earlier relationships that you have. So that then when you're a grown-ass woman, which you are in your 40s and your 50s, you start to just be more bold about what you want and what your desires are. Was that kind of your experience, or was it different than that?
Well, yeah, I think it was. But I also have to say that as I began dating in my 50s, I was dating men my age and sometimes older who maybe hadn't grown and thought and changed in their attitudes around sexuality. Mm-hmm. So that often, and this is still the case, to be presented with an older woman who is pretty proactive around her sexuality, who knows what she likes and can talk about it, it's often as intimidating as it is exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's like all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, I haven't come across this before.
Right. And that's, if for someone who's really secure, that's great. They're excited. But for someone who's a little concerned, it can be a little disconcerting.
Yeah.
Because, and I have to admit, I don't always do a great job of speaking about what I need. It's something I think women have a lot of challenges around, maybe more so when we're older, but I still struggle to say what I want sometimes, or to, more importantly, speak up when it's not quite right for what I need in that moment.
Thank you for saying that. I just, because I had some experiences over the last week. It's interesting how the energy ebbs and flows with love and sexuality and just interactions with different people. And it's like all of a sudden there's some energy in the mix. And so I've been given some opportunities recently to either speak my mind or not speak my mind. And I have also had the opportunity to connect with more, I would say, evolved man in the realm of sex and sexuality and just communicating about that. And it was really powerful because there was something that happened that I hadn't spoke up about yet. And my intention was to address it, but I hadn't had a chance and I hadn't taken the opportunity yet. And he presenced it. And it was really powerful because he presenced it he asked a question that allowed me to presence it. And then he totally took responsibility.
Nice.
And it was this like mind-blowing experience because I'm sure you can guess that hasn't happened to me very often in my life, and to have this man model that for me was paramount. It just opened me up to this like, wow, this is an evolved human being and I want more of this. But so let's go back to that though, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are going to listen to this episode and say, dang, that's me too. Like I still don't speak up. There are things that I don't say that I want to say. There are things that I like that I'm not expressing. And there are things that I don't like that I don't know how to express without offending someone. And so let's dive into that a bit.
Okay. Yeah. In the book that I wrote, Inviting Desire, a lot of that premise is around this idea that if we as women don't understand our needs in a broader sense around taking care of ourselves and allowing ourselves to get the things we need, and then specifically into how we experience pleasure, if we're unaccustomed to talking about them, if we're not able or capable sometimes to say, this is what I do or don't like, we shut down our own ability to experience greater pleasure. And I think we're not raised that way. at least in an older generation, I'd like to think it's changing, but around sex education, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So that so many women don't even have the intimate experience with their bodies in terms of being able to touch themselves to find their own source of pleasure. So if you don't know how to touch yourself or what to do, then it's almost impossible to be able to communicate that to a partner.
Yes. Okay. So let's just pause there for a second, because I think I may have mentioned this before, but I was shocked in my late 20s and early 30s to discover that some of my friends had never masturbated. And I was speechless. It's like hard for me to even express it. I was like, what? I just had no way of understanding how you could go 20, 30, 40 years and never have explored your body in that way.
Yeah. You know, if you were raised in a really repressive childhood or you got caught touching yourself, you know, that would be a start. And then nowhere in our education are we encouraged as women to find pleasure in our own bodies. We assume that guys do it all the time, but there's no sort of conversation among women or in any avenue where we're going to be taught that says this is an acceptable thing to do. And oftentimes we're removed from the idea that we can take care of ourselves. I explored at a fairly early age and did that consistently over my lifetime. I like to use the word self-pleasuring because it sounds prettier.
It does. It does.
And it really is what we're doing. I mean, it is pleasuring oneself. And I think it's the ideal tool for women who want to boost their level of desire, who want to figure out what turns them on or not, and who want to be able to have the language to share it with a partner. And I do have women in their 50s and 60s and 70s who have come to me and said, I've never touched myself. I don't know what to do. I've never had an orgasm. And I think it spans all ages, but it's probably more true. I'm making this up. It's probably more true among older women because we just didn't go there. You know, I know women who have never even looked at their vulva, who really don't have a clue as to what things look like down there or what to do. And you can't articulate to a partner, you know, could you touch me here? Could you touch me a little lighter? I mean, I can remember lying there upon, more than once going, oh, no. It's just in my head. Move to the left or no, stop. But I don't say it, because we don't tell guys that. And then I feel a little embarrassed and, you don't want to hurt the feelings.
When you don't want to mess up the vibe, like and then there's people who will shame you because they're embarrassed or they're like, they go into their own shame about not doing it right. I mean, they're just like so many layers of things that can occur.
Right. So what we do is we stay quiet and we don't get this kind of satisfaction we want, and we keep quiet about it because we don't want to offend them. We begin to feel, whoever is on the end of this being quiet part, we then begin to feel inadequate because we can't orgasm, and we can't orgasm the way we think we're meant to because we've seen TV or movies or we're told that's how it happens. I mean, I had a guy say to me, well, all the women I'm with orgasm. Like, yeah, right. I'm sure you're making that one up. But he didn't know because, in those times when I have said, I'm not in the mood or I don't feel it happening right now, or I'd love to have intimacy with you, but this isn't going to happen. 9 times out of 10, that man is going to take it as a personal affront, as if there's something wrong with him. So sometimes, it depends on where you want to go with your relationship. It's a little easier just to keep your mouth shut, and it doesn't serve anybody, but I think it's what happens.
So we've talked about communication on the podcast before. However, I feel like it is a topic we could talk about 100 times more because this is one of the hot topics that we kind of like. I know many people just sort of hit up against a wall when it comes to sex and sexuality with partners and even with ourselves. So, making commitments to ourselves and then figuring out, well, what are some ways to just sort of speak about it in an authentic way where I'm taking responsibility. But like, I love how you were just saying some things like, oh, I wish he'd, touch me softer there. Or I wish, he'd just move over to the left a little bit. So do you have any kind of tried and true tips and tricks that you could share with the Ignite Intimacy audience just that have worked for you?
Well, yeah. And I have a whole chapter on sort of thinking about what to say, role playing it, writing it down, coming up with statements.
Okay, so we'll tell us about your book briefly. We'll go into that a little bit more, but tell us a little bit about your book since you just mentioned you've got a chapter on this.
Well, like I said, progressing, very slowly through how women begin to get in touch with their senses first.
Mm-hmm.
Their sense of smell, their sense of taste, how their skin feels, what they like. I build this book up over a series of 30-day exercises.
And it's called Inviting Desire.
It's called Inviting Desire.
Okay.
A guide for women who want to, would think I would know that, for women who want to enhance their sex life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk about how to touch your body, how to begin to explore what it means to self-pleasure or masturbate. And I talk about the power of words, how important it is to sort of jumpstart the mental process. But I have a chapter that's called Learning to Ask for What You Want, which is where, I sort of talk about that and how do you find the language to say it in a way that's about you, about owning your own things. And, for example, one thing that someone can say, and I've done this before, is I was playing and I discovered that I really like when I do this. And so sort of sharing, because I think men like to know that we are, or whoever our partner might be, I think our partners want to know that we're interested in sex and that we're exploring, if we can make it to them, because sometimes egos get bruised, if we can kind of say, I want us to have a better sex life. And so part of that is me learning my own body. But by saying, I've discovered I enjoyed this, or I was playing around a little bit and discovered that when I touch myself right here, and then you can actually take their finger and show them, or you can use your own finger, or you can just describe it if touching feels too difficult, but saying it, saying, I like that, or saying things like, I wonder what it would feel like if we tried this.
I love that.
Yeah. So that the emphasis is it's not, I don't like it when you do this. It's changed into, I'd like to try. What if we do this, rather than being accusatory? I prefer a gentle touch to this, or could you stay right here? Or, ooh, I love what you're doing right now. Or please don't stop. That's exciting. So that they're all positive things.
Well, yes, I love that. And just affirming what they're doing well.
Yeah.
And then ooh, what if you tried this? Or what if you tried that?
And I think we forget that sometimes they don't really know either. And they might be a little afraid to ask. We have this whole setup that guys know what to do and that we're supposed to just let them do their thing. But sometimes they're a little clueless.
Totally. Not every guy is a Don Juan, It's like I'm sure that a lot of men are just as nervous as we are, It's like,
yeah, I think so. And when they get older, for older men as well as women, there's that issue of performance. Is this going to work? Are they going to want me? I mean, we all come to that moment of intimacy with some vulnerability, and it's easy to forget that guys do too. And That's why talking, I also say to women, if you think you can't talk to them, particularly if we're talking about sex early on in a relationship, and I would posit the question that if you can't talk to them about sex, then how can you feel comfortable enough to have sex with them?
Exactly. Well, I'm wondering, what if at first you're not comfortable speaking it, but what if you had some little note cards and a pen by the bed, and as a first step, you could just write it?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, another way to do that would be through texting or little love notes, or having conversation out of the bedroom before you actually get there and say, let's talk about what turns us on.
Yeah.
What would you like me to do to you? Or starting with something gentle and something slow, so that it's removed from genitals, and talk about rubbing one's feet, or could I touch you here? But writing it can be kind of fun. Watching a movie together that might spark some ideas that's that's picked to be a little more gentle, a little more realistic around sex. I mean, watching porn isn't likely to mirror any good conversation for you.
Yeah. Well, and also couples masturbate for each other because that's a wonderful way, or self-pleasure in front of each other. So then you start to see, well, how does my partner touch him or herself?
Right. I think that's harder for older couples.
Okay.
You've got to be comfortable with that, being on display thing. And, for some older women, just the idea of having the lights on is a little daunting. So the idea of showing each other is hard, but it is a good idea. It's an excellent diet. I was in a conversation with a man who I was seeing, and we thought we were heading towards sex. As it turns out, we didn't. But he asked me what I liked, and he asked me to write him and tell him what I liked. And I thought that was really interesting because he wanted to know specifics. And for us, that was a perfectly comfortable venue. And so he learned a lot by what I was willing to write in an email. Now, you have to trust the person that you're about to share something that intimate with. I don't recommend you, send things out there if you don't know someone well enough to make sure they're going to respect what you said.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a foundation of trust that you need to have before you put yourself out there. If you've had one date with someone and you don't know them very well, that may not be the best, route to go from the jump. But, it's all about building trust, because I know for me, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of people, once I feel that trust and I feel that comfort with someone, then, all bets are off. I can open up and I can just allow myself to be in the fullness of that energy. However, if there is a piece missing there and that trust is not solidified, I will shut down. I will close off. I'll get tense. It won't be an enjoyable experience for anyone.
Right. And I think that's a struggle because we have this whole trend that's very much present for older adults too, which is friends with benefits is fine. And if you want to go and find someone to have sex with, go for it. And I totally agree with that. But you have to know where your comfort level is and what would give you the best experience. And so is it the fun contact and the sense of intimacy that is lacking all of those things? So you're just having a good time? Or do you want to strive to build something that's a little deeper that I think is more fulfilling? And I prefer to have built up some trust, some communication, some sense of who each other are, so that the flirting and all of that preliminary activity is there. That boosts arousal. It brings excitement for me as well as my partner. And for women who struggle with arousal, they need to find a way to begin to build that sense of anticipation so that they want to have sex. And it's all sort of tied in together, is sort of figuring out what do you need to make pleasure good for you. And that's one of the reasons that in the beginning of this book, I say, this is about you. This is not about how to please your partner, because we're given whole lots of information on how to please a guy. But if we don't have an investment in pleasing ourselves and making sure that we get our pleasure too, I don't think sex is going to be as good.
Exactly. Our pleasure matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a long time, we've been afraid to say that for women, and we've been afraid to say that ourselves. Fear of being shamed, fear of looking like there's something wrong with us. I can remember when my mother referred to me once years ago as a used shoe.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Old school.
I married him. So, he bought the used shoe, but it was a lovely statement that we still hear. This was 1975, and, that was the message I got. And I think that's still a message that women get, and maybe older women too. It's just quieter and a little bit different, but yeah.
Well, so let me share, I'd love to share your background with our audience, just so we all know the brilliant woman that we're speaking with today. So Ignite Intimacy Community, we are just really, really blessed to have Walker Thornton with us here today, talking about these powerful issues that affect all of us, really. Whether you're in midlife, whether you're a woman or a man, or identify and as something else on the gender scale. Walker Thornton is a sex educator speaker, and sexual health writer. Her mission is to help women embrace their sexuality in a way that feels comfortable at each stage of life. Her writing has appeared on the American Sexual Health Association website, Huffington Post, Better After 50, Senior Planet, and other sites, and she is the sexual health columnist for Midlife Boulevard and writes about midlife sexuality at Kinkly.com. Walker currently serves on the Sexuality and Aging Consortium of Widener University's Leadership Committee. She has presented at the Sexuality and Aging Symposium, Catalyst Con, which is where we met, and in other venues across the country. Walker was a former executive director of sexual assault crisis centers in both Alabama and Virginia. So I'd love to dive into some of that with you a little bit as well, Walker. And with many years of nonprofit board experience at the local and state levels, Walker now works to educate and support older women with sexuality-related issues. So Walker also published this book, Inviting Desire, and let's see. So Inviting Desire, a guide for women who want to enhance their sex life. Talk to us a little bit about what drove you to write this book.
Okay. Well, part of it came from my experiences working in the field of sexual violence. I began to realize that we were doing healthy relationship education for kids in the schools when we were allowed to do that in certain states. And that we talked about respect and communication and dating, but that we weren't addressing the needs of adult women. And certainly in the context of working with individuals who've experienced sexual violence, we didn't, as coaches, as first responders, providers, we didn't talk about sex and sexuality. It's the wrong time, wrong place. But I began to sort of look at that piece and think about what women needed. And then as I started to write both a memoir that's in process, sort of, and date and get feedback from women as I was blogging, I realized that there are a lot of older women who don't feel that anyone's speaking to their needs. Most of the information for women, who are in that premenopause time is kind of a doomsday scenario. It's all over. You're going to be dried up. Your vagina is going to get shriveled and you're not going to want to have sex. And
Yikes.
Old people don't have sex and yuck. And I thought, well, that's
terrifying. And it's not true.
No,
yeah.
It's not true. And so I felt that we needed education that was geared a little bit more to the average. And I write and move in a heterosexual sort of sphere, conventional. And that this group of people needed resources as well. They needed to be a little more empowered about it. They needed to hear someone who looks a lot like them say, it's okay. Yes, we can have sex. Yes, we can have great sex. Yes, we can use sex toys and we can explore kink and whatever. And I started to think about the steps and what women needed. And I originally wrote this as a series of blog articles and then realized it needed to go much deeper, needed some research, but that there was a lot of validity there. So with chapters like Create the Right Environment, which is about figuring out what you're comfortable with. What do you need? Do you need sheets? Do you need lights? Do you not need lights? What does it actually look like in a room or in a space to feel comfortable having sex? What is it like as we age? How do we redefine sex? Ways to build mutual desire. So getting into some couples things, what happens when you're no longer having sex? How do you go back to intimacy? Because I also began to see that sometimes women get bored. They get tired, the stresses of life, all those things that crop up. I had a husband with a chronic illness, so I had some experience around that there are all these things that could be addressed around the idea of sexuality, with the primary idea, I think, for me being sex is fun. Sex is actually good for our body, talking about sexual health. Stress benefits, anti-stress, the hormonal changes, the surges of oxytocin that come into our body. There are a lot of reasons we should be having sex. So I wanted to write it in a language that was more appropriate for a 50-year-old than a 20-year-old. And each chapter has suggested journal things or exercises or various ways to implement what I'm talking about so that they're gentle. There's not a lot of language in this. There's very little stuff that people would call, that would make people really uncomfortable. It's a very safe for work kind of book. An exercise might be go lingerie shopping. Think about what you want to wear, or look at vibrators. What kind would you buy? What would you do with it? Things that bring it into reality in a way that are really simple, but basic and doable, very doable. So that's sort of where I got with that. And I published it in July.
I love that. Well, it kind of normalizes it a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm comfortable talking about sex, and I'm comfortable helping someone brainstorm, male or female. And that takes away a little of the mystique for people. And I'm also willing to say how old I am, and, to really listen. And as I began to work with people one-on-one, sort of helping them come up with ideas and workarounds and inspiring and, nudging, say, this is what we can do. What is it you want to do? What's holding you back? What do you need? And always reinforcing that individual gets to choose what they want, and that the world is wide open to them, wherever it is they want to go. And, I think it's going well. Someone from Japan bought the book the other day. I was pretty tickled to see that I had a little tiny royalty check coming from Japan.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So I hope that more women will begin to sort of embrace this and use the tips for how to work out things in their relationship, for how to understand their own bodies, and, that we can create a wider group of sexually awakened individuals who are getting what they need and want.
I love that. And also, so this is really about helping women to take charge of their own sexual relationship with themselves, with others.
Yeah, and very much so. It's not a threatening way. It's in a very sort of, I hate to use the word empowering, but knowledge is power. And if we don't know these things, if we don't feel comfortable and more secure in what we want, and we don't practice speaking up, then we won't get what we want. And having a healthy relationship as we go through life is crucial. So, to me, it seems like good old common sense.
But it's not. It's not to everyone.
No, it's not. And, in my family, I've gotten very little feedback from the women in my family, so I'm not sure if they're not reading it or it embarrasses them. And then I've had women say, thank you so much. I had one woman say to me, right as I started writing a particular column, she wrote me and she said, my husband thanks you in advance. Which I thought was really cute. I mean, I wanted her to get that this was for her, but I also knew that it was important to her to be able to please her partner. And I'm willing to work with people wherever they want to start from and whatever it is they need. And then we go from there.
I love that. I love that because we all know that there has been a lot of programming around sex and sexuality, especially coming from the, religious, like Catholic, patriarchal background. And I know my parents come from, my dad was born in 28, my mom was born in 35. And so they were pretty unexpressive to us and unhelpful as far as sex, sexuality, knowing your body, talking about it, having a safe space to talk about it, asking for what you want and need, saying no. I mean, those conversations never happened in my household. And it wasn't until I was much older that I could have these open conversations with my mom about men and sex and sexuality and that kind of thing. So, and there are still many, many people in this world that are living in this shame-based reality around sex and sexuality.
Yeah, very much so. And who do you go to? And if you're an older woman and you go to your doctor with a question or concern, the chances are just as, you've got a 50-50 shot that this doctor's even going to be able to willing to talk to you.
Exactly.
So there's not a lot of help there. And sometimes women are shamed. And so there's just a lack of good information that gives women that permission to do whatever it is they need. I've heard a number of doctor stories, and when I hear the doctor stories, I'm saddened by that. I'd like to start working more with the medical profession if I could find my way in to sort of talk about the ways that we pull that all together. But it's an uphill battle. And while I mainly talk to older women, there's a piece of me that would love to go back to doing the work with the teens and the younger women, because that's where I think if we don't teach women about their bodies, if we don't teach them that it's okay to touch and own their own sexuality, then we've handicapped them a little bit when they get out there in that world with young men, if that's their choice and partners, who have a presumption that it's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't given women the background that would allow them to be comfortable enough to say, that's not what I want.
Yeah. Well, and so let's talk just briefly about the work that you did with the teens at these sexual assault crisis centers.
Right.
What were just some of the takeaways that you received from this powerful and really difficult work?
Well, we're talking in the 90s. When I first started doing this, it was in Alabama, when we were not allowed to talk about sex, not even on the college level. We couldn't use the word sex. And
wow.
Oh, yeah, it was difficult. But what I felt happened sometimes when I would walk out of classrooms, because I used to do a lot of these, working with middle school kids and then a couple of fraternities, is that neither sex understood the other sex. So that girls didn't really understand the male sort of sex drive, and that guys were always thinking about sex. And we didn't, so there was this sort of missing bit of understanding the other half. And without that understanding, then you didn't, I'm not sure I know how to express this, giving girls permission to say yes, giving girls permission to say no. There are all these things around the idea of sexual assault that are fraught with victim blaming, but I think if you don't teach girls what their clothes, their actions, their choices are viewed by the outside world, then we fail to give them a valuable piece of information. I used to say to girls sometimes, I can wear whatever I want. I can go do whatever I want. And if I choose to walk down the street at 2 a.m. in a see-through lace skirt, that's my choice. This was a story that happened in Florida, and I don't remember the details, but I think the young man was not found guilty because the girl wore a see-through lace skirt. So it was determined that she was really sort of asking for it.
Oh my God.
And I don't know that I have that exactly right. But the point I wanted to make was we have to think about the world around us. We can do whatever we want. We're entitled to step up any old way we want to. But we sadly have to understand that not everybody has that same respect that we do, that not everybody is going to be taught as gently to understand a yes and a no, and that we have to have that awareness. But unfortunately, in the day we did rape prevention, and the onus was on girls. Mm-hmm. You have to protect yourselves. You have to be careful because we're not going to mess with them. And I think that idea about sex and who's in charge, i.e. the guys, has been sort of the way our culture has gone. And of course, we're seeing that again in a different sort of way in these days. And so the way to go around this, I think, is to empower women to say, you do get to make choices. Here's what you get to do. And that's based on a firm knowledge. I think that was roundabout, and my apologies.
No, that's okay. And it is. And it would be really dynamic to have a conversation with males and females about this particular topic. And what's your experience of hearing no? And what's your experience of saying no? And what's your experience of seeing someone dressed in a really sexy outfit, and what's your experience in wearing that outfit, and just starting to get some conversations happening with all members of different groups, so that we can start to understand how it's perceived by the other party.
Yeah, and it's a delicate thing. I mean, it's kind of hard to do. I used to feel, and it may be a different environment now, but I used to feel that the conversations weren't as good if you had a mixed group. And this was on the college level. Mm-hmm. Much easier to talk to the girls alone or to the boys alone, because all kinds of stuff came into the mix in that. But we just don't do enough to help both sides understand. I mean, I think today's concern about porn and the stories that we hear about the expectations young men have of the female partners in their lives because of what they've seen on porn are sort of the same example in a way. They don't have the real information, so they're basing it on something that looks very exciting, but that's not mirrored reality at all. So we have people going out here and doing the wrong things and demanding looks and attitudes and acts and various things that aren't really what normal people do, and that really aren't very satisfying for their female partners, but they've seen it in porn. Mm-hmm. So again, we've given up on doing the really good education because we're afraid of it. We're afraid of the parent pressure. We're afraid that if girls get too sexually empowered, they'll turn into, I don't know what. So we just don't do sex in this world very well, not in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this movement that you have, this book, Inviting Desire, the writing that you do is making an impact. It's helping to get the conversation out there in a bigger way, to help people feel more connected to the conversation and to know that they're not alone. And ultimately, it's like, we all think that we're the only one, I'm the only one, oh my God, I must be the only one that is experiencing this, or like, oh, what an idiot I am. I should have said that, or I should have, expressed myself better, or why did I say that when I said it? It was terrible timing. And, is this person going to want to see me again? And, just all of these different thoughts and judgments that we experience. And, we tend to feel really lonely and really alone in it, but we're not alone. We have all had funky, weird, uncomfortable experiences that didn't work for us sexually. I mean, most of us anyways have had these experiences. And so by you doing the work that you're doing, it's helping to connect people to something and someone else that's bigger than themselves, so that they can feel like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that has experienced this thing.
Right. And I think we're normalizing it. We're saying there's a wider experience. You're not broken. And that's a term that Emily Nagassi uses when she talks to women who talk about desire, is that there's that sense that some women have of, I must be broken if it's not working the way I've made up that it's supposed to. And so we normalize it by saying, there is no normal. Everything is normal. There's this huge range, because we're living in a world where women are getting vaginal facelifts, and you have these bizarre women on reality TV talking about sex in a way that's not very healthy either. I mean, we may say, oh, look, we're using the word vagina more, but I'm not sure it's helping in that. And at all. I think it's just putting out a level of pressure. But having the conversation, being able to have people talk about things in a comfortable way helps take some of the stigma away. And I don't think it takes the mystique away. I don't think it makes it any less fabulous. I think actually it can become more fabulous when you can lose some of those layers of awkwardness or shame or fear and just kind of really say, I want to have this. I want to have sex with you. I like sex. This is what I enjoy. There's really nothing wrong that can come out of that as long as everybody's consenting and practicing protection.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so Walker, where can people find you online, and where can we get your book?
You can get my book at Amazon. I think it's also available for the Nook and on Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
I have it in a book or Kindle. And you can find me at Walker Thornton, Thornton, walkerthornton.com. That's where I have a website. And, people can write me if they have a question. It's walker@walkerthornton.com. Sometimes I'll answer the question directly. I'll always write back, or I'll make it into an article with an anonymous Q&A.
Great.
And I'm on Facebook under Walker J. Thornton. So I'm out there and always happy to talk to people. And I'm now doing one-on-one work with individuals who want to dig a little deeper and do some little problem solving around their own sexual desire.
Wonderful. Well, Walker, thank you so much for being here with us today. This was a great conversation about some very, very important topics. So Ignite Intimacy Community, check out Walker, walkerthornton.com. It's WALKER Thornton, THORNTON.com, Walker@walkerthornton.com, and also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can find her. The book is Inviting Desire. That can be found on Amazon and ordered direct there. And Walker, I'm just so grateful that you were here with us. If, our community has any questions and you want to reach us directly, just send an email, hello@igniteintimacy.com. That's hello@igniteintimacy.com. Check us out on iTunes, leave a review, share this with your friends. We're having powerful conversations here that we need to have more of. And that's the whole reason why I launched this podcast. I just want to be part of broadening the conversation, as so many others are doing right now. So Walker, thank you again for being here with us.
Oh, thank you. It was fun. I'm always pumped about getting to talk about sex and getting people excited and exploring and thinking. So thank you. This is a great show you're doing.
Beautiful. Well, cool. I'm just so grateful that we met. I love your energy, and I look forward to keeping in touch. And Ignite Intimacy community, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Ignite Intimacy, and we'll see you on the next one. For now, stay blessed. Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.